In the northern reaches of Krynn, where the wind cuts like steel and the trees stand twisted and bare, there is a keep that time forgot. Dargaard Keep. Its towers rise like jagged teeth from the mist, and its halls are silent except for the whispers of those who once called it home. There, in armor black as midnight, sits a knight who is no longer living, and yet cannot die. His eyes, hidden behind a scorched helm, have seen centuries pass. His hands have wielded swords that burned with the sins of gods and men alike. He was called Lord Soth, once a knight of Solamnia, once a hero, once a man. He is now something else entirely, a deathless sentinel cursed by pride, haunted by love and bound to memory that will not release him. His story is one of glory, betrayal, and tragedy. It stretches from the shining orders of Solamnia to the ruin of Dargaard Keep into the shadowed realm of Ravenloft and back again. This is the story of a man who fell farther than any knight should ever fall, and yet his legacy continues to echo across the ages. This is the tale of Lord Soth, the Knight of the Black Rose. The world of Krynn, home of the Dragonlance saga, was once a land of shining kingdoms and noble orders. Among its greatest defenders were the Knights of Solamnia, a brotherhood founded on the gods' highest ideals: wisdom, honor, and courage. They were divided into three orders: the Crown, the Sword, and the Rose, each representing one part of the knight's virtue. The Order of the Rose was the highest, reserved for those whose lives embodied true nobility of spirit, and in those days, few were spoken of with more admiration than Lord Soth, Lord of Nightland. Soth was said to be everything a knight should be: brave, eloquent, fiercely loyal to the measure, the sacred code of the Knights of Solamnia. He defended the weak, sought justice without favor, and led men with quiet strength. He was not only respected, he was beloved. But even the most virtuous man has a shadow, and Soth's would come to rule him. He was married to Lady Krynn, a noblewoman of good standing. Their union brought him political power and respect, but not happiness. Courtly gossip whispered that their marriage was cold and joyless, that Krynn's pride matched his own, and that their household was filled with arguments behind closed doors. It's said that Soth's downfall began the day he encountered a Sylvanesti elf named Isolde Danessa. She was a priestess of a goddess of healing and compassion. Where Krynn was proud, Isolde was gentle. Where Soth was hardened by years of duty, Isolde's presence softened him. In Isolde, Soth found peace, and in Soth, she saw a man who could still be redeemed by love. But that love would come at a terrible cost. In time, Lady Krynn discovered their secret. Some sources suggest she confronted Isolde in a fit of rage. Others say she accused Soth of treason against his vows, intending to destroy him politically. Whatever the truth, the confrontation ended in blood. Krynn died that night, and her attendants along with her, a noblewoman slain in her husband's keep. The council of the Knights of Solamnia gathered to judge him. Even his allies could not defend the evidence laid before them. And so, Lord Soth, once the pride of the Order of the Rose, was stripped of his titles and lands. He was exiled to his ancestral fortress, Dargaard Keep, where he was to live out the remainder of his life in disgrace. But rather than fade into obscurity, Soth retreated into a world of his own making. He surrounded himself with retainers loyal only to him, men who had followed him through every battle and would follow him still. He rebuilt his life around Isolde, marrying her in defiance of his exile and sealing his keep off from the outside world. For a time, there was peace, and for a time, there was love. But the gods do not forget so easily. Isolde bore Soth a son, and for a brief moment, it seemed his redemption was within reach. Yet whispers began to spread through the keep. Isolde, terrified for her son's soul, prayed for guidance, and one night she received a vision, instructions from Mishakal, and that her husband could still be redeemed. The vision told her this, that the king priest of Istar, his arrogance would bring destruction upon Krynn, But if Soth rode to Ishtar and confronted the king priest, he might avert the cataclysm entirely. He could save the world, and in doing so, he could save himself. Soth listened to the vision in silence. It was the chance that he had prayed for, proof that his service and honor had not been completely lost. He swore to follow the guidance of Mishakal and ride to Ishtar to attempt to stop the cataclysm. And so, the disgraced knight gathered his men and set out. Their armor gleamed once more, banners unfurled with the sigil of the rose, and the first time in years Soth felt the light of purpose upon him. But pride is a patient enemy, and even on the road to redemption, it waits. As Soth's company rode towards Ishtar, they were approached by 3 elven handmaidens. They claimed to have been sent to guide him. They spoke softly, with grace and trust, and Soth, ever a man moved by beauty, welcomed them into his camp. But these handmaidens were deceivers, whispering poison in his ears. They told him that Isolde had betrayed him, and she had taken another man while he was away. They fed his jealousy until it burned hotter than his faith, and in that fire, his vow began to crumble. At the edge of the world's destruction, Lord Soth had been given a final chance to stand among the righteous, but instead of faith, he chose suspicion. Instead of courage, he chose anger. And as the skies began to burn, he turned his horse not towards salvation, but toward home. Because if the world was to end, he would not let it end with betrayal. Krynn remembers its heroes and mourns its fallen. None are as tragic as Lord Soth, the Knight of the Rose. After being stripped of his titles and exiled to Dargaard Keep, he might have spent his days in quiet regret. But pride is a companion that lingers even when honor is gone. Within the cold walls of the fortress, Soth met Isolde Danessa, an elf maid from Sylvanesti. She was a priestess of Mishakal, a healer and light in a world gone dark. Where the disgraced knight carried shame, she offered kindness. Where his heart was heavy with sorrow, she offered hope. And against all reason, Soth fell in love again. Isolde bore him a son, and for a fleeting moment it seemed that redemption might be within reach. Yet the world would not forget his past. Whispers spread through the keep, rumors of impropriety, of a child born under a shadow. Even the elves murmured suspicion, and in the court of his own mind, pride began to eclipse love. The king priest of Ishtar prepared his ritual, a plea that would invite devastation upon Krynn. It was then that Soth received guidance, not from the sky, not from the armies, but through Isolde's prayer to Mishakal. She was shown a vision. If Soth rode to Ishtar and confronted the king priest, he might avert the coming cataclysm. He alone had a chance to save the world, and perhaps himself. It was a final chance at redemption, and Soth accepted it. He gathered the knights loyal to him, men who had followed him through battles and rode forth. But whispers followed, spirits of vengeance, sometimes described as elf maidens. They suggested that Isolde had been unfaithful, that the child was not his, that his love had been betrayed. By the time Soth reached the borders of Ishtar, his purpose wavered. Anger and jealousy had taken root where duty and honor once stood, and he turned back. When he returned to Dargaard Keep, this fortress was already consumed by fire. Isolde perished in the flames, calling upon the gods in her final moments. She and the child were killed when the shockwave of the cataclysm caused a massive chandelier to fall upon them. With her dying breath, she cursed her husband, binding him to undeath. Lord Soth died that night, but he would not rest. When the smoke cleared, Dargaard Keep stood eerily intact, as though untouched. Inside, Lord Soth sat upon his throne, his armor blackened, his face hidden beneath a scorched helm. His eyes glowed with an unholy fire, a mark of a curse laid upon him. A voice. His voice was a whisper of the grave. He had become a death knight, a creature of divine punishment doomed to relive the failure that had condemned him. Those knights who had followed him shared his fate, bound to him in undeath. The elven spirits, the ones who whispered doubt, became a haunting chorus, echoing betrayal through the halls of Dargaard Keep. Where once he fought for honor and love, now he reigned over silence, shadow, and despair. Through Mishakal's guidance, redemption had been offered, but in the end, it was Soth's pride, not divine wrath, that damned him forever. For decades after the cataclysm, Dargaard Keep stood silent, a monument to tragedy and pride. Its towers loomed over the northern wastes, shrouded in mist. Ghost fire glimmered faintly in broken windows, and the shadows of the past lingered in every hall. Though cursed to undeath, Soth's mind remained intact. He remembered every choice, every failure, every moment that led him to this place. The gods had denied him peace, but they had not taken his memory, and it was memory, not hunger, that tormented him most. Over the centuries, tales of Lord Soth spread across Krynn. Peasants whispered his name in fear. Knights of Solamnia warned their charges of the black-armored lord. Even the bravest warriors felt a chill when the stories reached them. And yet the knightly oaths he had once held dear flickered faintly somewhere inside him. He was no demon, nor fully man. He was something between, an eternal reminder of pride and failure. Then came the War of the Lance. As dragon armies swept across the land, the name of Lord Soth reached the ears of one mortal general, Kitara Uthmatar. Ambitious, fearless, and cunning, she sought the power of the DeathKnight for her own ends. She entered Dargaard Keep, facing silence and 100 restless dead. She offered Soth a bargain: serve the Dragon Queen, and he could wield his power once more in the world of the living. Soth accepted, not out of loyalty, not out of love, but out of fascination. In Kitara, he recognized ambition unbound by mercy, a reflection of the knight he had once been, before pride and failure consumed him. On the battlefield, Soth's presence was unmatched. Mortals fell before his cursed sword. Dragons hesitated in the face of his relentless advance. Fear spread wherever he rode. His undead knights followed without question, and together they left devastation in their wake. Even so, his service to Kitara was complex. It was not true loyalty, nor love. Perhaps fascination. Perhaps recognition of a kindred spirit. Perhaps the faint hope of reclaiming purpose, however hollow. After the fall of the dragon armies, Soth returned to Dargaard Keep. Silence reclaimed the fortress. The banshees resumed their lament, the halls echoing with unending sorrow. Time passed, but memory did not fade. Even centuries later, Lord Soth remained haunted. He would sit for days in the shadows of Dargaard Keep, remembering the woman whose death had damned him, Isolde. Her memory was a constant weight, a reminder of the choices that could never be undone. Lord Soth was more than undead. He was a legend made flesh, a cautionary tale of pride lost and the cost of failing the gods. And though the world moved on without him, his shadow endured, waiting in Dargaard Keep, eternal, unyielding, and even haunted by the memory of what he lost. When Lord Soth vanished from Krynn, it did not happen in battle or by a divine act. The mists came quietly, rolling across the plains like a living shroud. In a heartbeat, he was gone, drawn into a realm beyond mortal comprehension. This place was called Ravenloft, the demiplane of dread, a prison for those whose sins had bound them to eternal torment. From Soth's memories and regrets, the dark powers forged a new land, Sithicus. It was a realm of endless twilight where the sun never rose and the air carried the scent of decay. Forests of black-bark trees covered the land, their pale leaves whispering like ghosts. Broken castles and ruined roads littered the countryside, reflections of Soth's past, drawn from his own mind. Even the people of Sithicus were echoes of his guilt. The elves, twisted by the dark powers into a pale and hollow folk. They did not remember how they came to live there, nor why their lives felt haunted by loss. Their leader was a woman named Inza, proud and sharp-witted, who one day would play a role in Soth's fate. Within this cursed realm, Lord Soth was its undisputed master, yet he ruled nothing that could satisfy him. His keep, Dargaard, stood as a dark mirror to Dargaard Keep, but its stones crumbled even as he rebuilt them. His knights obeyed his will, but their faces changed each time he looked away. Every effort to restore his glory ended in failure, for that was the shape of his punishment. At first, Soth barely noticed the difference between this realm and the world he had left. He rode through Sithicus as he once did in Solamnia, expecting fealty and forcing fear. But the land itself betrayed him, the roads looping endlessly, the trees whispering the name as old as the wind blew by. The banshees that had haunted him in Krynn still sang his name, joined now by new voices. Those of the elves who cursed his presence in the land that mourned under his shadow. Unlike the other lords of Ravenloft, Soth did not crave conquest. He ignored the dark powers who ruled the mists, treating them with the same silent defiance that once defined his life. He remained withdrawn in his keep, lost in reflections, surrounded by the echoes of the past. And in that refusal to play the dark powers game, Sithicus began to crumble. The forests grew blacker, the rivers ran dry, even the sky dimmed to gray. It was said the land itself was dying of neglect, a mirror of Soth's own decaying soul. Centuries later, something began to change. In the novel Spectre of the Black Rose, the mist stirred once more. The figures from Soth's memory returned to torment him. Inza, now a woman of ambition and bitterness, sought to overthrow him. The dark powers encouraged her rebellion, testing the boundaries of Soth's dominion. For the first time in decades, the Death Knight was forced to act, not out of vengeance, but self-preservation. Soth's dreams turned restless. He began to hear Isolde's voice once more, not as a curse, but as a plea for release. The line between illusion and memory blurred, and he faced again the blurring vision of Dargaard Keep. In that moment, he did something the dark powers could not predict. He refused to cling to his torment any longer. He turned away from the illusions, from the mists, and from the lies that bound him. And the mists receded. Soth was permitted to leave the demiplane of dread, one of the few beings ever to do so. Some believed the dark powers just had no further use of him. Others claimed that by accepting his punishment without defiance, he denied them with the satisfaction they sought. Whatever the truth, Lord Soth returned to Krynn, to the long shadows of Nightland and the ruins of Dargaard Keep. But even after his escape, the mark of Ravenloft never left him. Sithicus remained behind, continuing to exist within the mists, now ruled by Inza as its new Dark Lord. Her rule reflected her own pride and bitterness, just as Soth's had reflected his despair. Thus, the curse of Sithicus endured. A land born from guilt, ruled by those who could never forgive themselves. Lord Soth, once a knight of Solamnia, once a lord of Dargaard, and once a prisoner of Ravenloft, had come full circle. He was no longer the hero, nor the villain, nor the pawn of gods or powers. He was simply a shadow of his former self, not by chains, but by memory. And so his story in Ravenloft ended not with redemption, nor with destruction, but with a hollow kind of peace, the silence that follows after the last note of a song once filled with sorrow. When the mists of Ravenloft finally released Lord Soth, he was violently ejected, returned once more to the world of Krynn. He did not pass through time seamlessly. Decades had gone by, and the land he came back to was fundamentally changed. The age of mortals had begun. The War of the Lance was a forgotten memory. The gods themselves had seemingly vanished, and the world was now stalked by immense, monstrous dragon overlords. Soth found himself once again in his ancestral home, Dargaard Keep, but it was a cold, empty ruin. The experience in Ravenloft, especially the quiet torment of his domain, had stripped him of his arrogance. His undead host still lingered, bound to his command, but the power that fueled his unlife now felt like a bitter, unwanted chain. For the first time in centuries, Lord Soth was truly weary. In this new godless age, the Knight of the Black Rose was little more than a whisper, an ancient ghost story. Yet, as the world careened toward another conflict, Soth was once again drawn to the nexus of power. This time, the conflict was the War of Souls, and the nexus was Mina, the prophet of the one god. Mina was young, radiant, and utterly devoted to her mysterious deity. When her army marched through Nightland, she came before Dargaard Keep, demanding the service and loyalty of the legendary Death Knight on behalf of her god. Mina spoke with an unshakable conviction that Soth himself once held when he was a virtuous Knight of the Rose. She sought to enlist him to serve her master, and being revealed to be the Queen of Darkness, Sithicus, who had disguised herself as the one god. Soth stood motionless within the ruin of his keep. He did not rage, nor did he mock her. After centuries of failing the gods, of serving false ambition, and of fruitless torment, he had found a profound, desolate apathy. He simply refused. He was finished with promises, finished with servitude, and finished with the gods themselves. Mina, stunned and enraged by his insolence, immediately ordered her forces to attack. And as she did so, the divine energy of Sithicus, the one god, surged forth. The goddess did not grant a final mercy. She unleashed her divine power to annihilate him utterly for his refusal. For the first time since his death, Lord Soth felt the warmth of true divine fire. It was blinding, catastrophic, and intended to erase him completely. But in that instant, having finally accepted his guilt and refused to fall prey to the god's schemes one last time, Soth's spirit was truly at rest. The goddess's furious attack only succeeded in violently unraveling the magical curse that had bound him to unlife. His armor, the blackened icon of his damnation, crumbled to dust. The hateful glow faded from his eyes, and his spirit, having achieved a silent internal redemption by his final act of free will, passed quietly into the true afterlife, finally free from the Death Knight's torment. As Lord Soth vanished, the unholy bonds he maintained across the worlds were severed. The undead knights that served him vanished, their oath to their master fulfilled. The banshees who had wept for his sins were silenced forever. The land of Nightland finally knew stillness. Though many legends grew around Lord Soth's end, the truth was the quiet conclusion of a man's long, agonizing fall. He had been given what he had earned in his final moment of clarity: release. His shadow would no longer linger. In the Chronicles of Krynn, the definitive end of the Knight of the Black Rose was recorded. The Death Knight's laughter was heard no more. In the end, Lord Soth's story isn't about only monsters or magic. It's about a man who tried to live by a code so rigid that it broke him. And when it did, he had nothing left to hold on to but pride. That pride became his curse, his armor, and finally his tomb. And yet, through every incarnation, from Solamnia to Sithicus, from life to undeath, there was always a glimmer of what he might have been. A knight who could have saved the world. A husband who could have been forgiven. A soul who could have known peace. His tale reminds us that heroism isn't just about strength or victory. It's about mercy. And mercy to forgive others. And the courage to forgive ourselves. Lord Soth never found that mercy. But maybe, in the quiet end, he finally stopped fighting long enough to see it. So the next time your party faces a Death Knight on the road, or hears the tolling of unseen bells through the fog, remember the man beneath the armor, and the promise he broke, trying to be perfect. Because in the worlds of gods and dragons, the greatest tragedies are always the human ones. This has been the story of Lord Soth, Knight of the Black Rose, a fallen hero, a deathless legend, and a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. Thanks for joining me, everybody. This is James from the Dungeon Puffin. Later, guys.